Social Housing Reform, Flexible Purchasing and Remedial Matters Bill, second reading.
The Social Housing Reform, Flexible Purchasing and Remedial Matters Bill is set down for committee stage forthwith. I declare the House in committee for consideration of the Social Housing Reform, Flexible Purchasing and Remedial Matters Bill. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker. Members, the House is in committee on the Social Housing Reform, Flexible Purchasing and Remedial Matters Bill. The question is that Part 1 stand part. I call Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm very pleased to take a call on this particular bill, and I want to say from the very beginning how disappointing it is to see the National Government's wholesale privatisation agenda for when it comes to state housing in New Zealand. And I want to talk from experience about this, because what does this actually mean in practice? In my electorate in Pomari, the National Government decided that they were going to deal with a housing area that had significant problems in Pomari, Farmer Crescent. What did they do? First of all, they booted everybody out. They completely evicted all of the tenants in that area, and they left the houses empty, and they got vandalised. Then what they do? Next they came along and they demolished all of the houses. They demolished all of the houses. Then what do they do after that? Well, of course, they hocked off the land to private developers, which is exactly the approach of this national government. It's about making opportunities for private developers. Did the problems disappear? Did the families who lived in those houses, who were the subject of many of the social problems, did they simply disappear? No, they just relocated elsewhere. The problems went with them to the other location. They didn't actually deal with the underlying problems and the underlying issues. So what have we seen in Pomari? Yes, they've got some nice new houses in the area where there was previously a whole lot of state housing. Only a fraction of them are social houses. Only a fraction of them are social houses, and the rest are privately owned. And what's the problem with that, Bill English asks? The problem with that is the overall number of social houses is decreasing.
He's saying, isn't that terrible?
And he's saying, isn't that terrible? The overall number of state houses is decreasing. Now, I say to Bill English, I actually like the idea of mixed neighbourhoods. I grew up in one. I grew up in an ex-state house with a state house next door, a private house on the other side, and a bunch of state houses in our street. It was a great way to grow up as a Kiwi kid. I'm fully supportive of that. But I tell you what, we've got to make sure that there's an adequate number of social houses if we're going to change the makeup of neighbourhoods. And that is not what this bill is going to achieve. What it's going to result in is a wholesale sell-off of existing state houses, and there is absolutely... OK, look, I'll open it up to Tim McIndoe. I'll put the same challenge to him that Andrew Little put to John Key and Bill English and the others this afternoon, which they didn't take up. Will they guarantee that every one of their new houses that are going to be built will be affordable houses? It's an open invitation. It's an open invitation right now. Will they all be affordable houses that the national government are going to be building? No one in the government benches is willing to make that promise to New Zealanders, because they know that's simply not going to be the case. Here's another example. Will they guarantee that the number of publicly owned social houses will not decrease? No. No, absolute silence from the government. So when it comes to the provisions of this bill, they are not willing to guarantee that the number of publicly owned social houses will not decrease. These are families that we're talking about. They are their homes that we are talking about. And this government think that they should be hocked off. They should be hocked off, and they are not willing to guarantee that the overall number won't be decreased. And I think that says an awful lot about the priorities of this current national government. No, and here we go. So Tim McIndoe is saying that this bill's all about increasing the provision of social housing. Who is going to deliver those houses? Who's going to deliver those houses? Because all of the organisations that Bill English and Paula Bennett and Nick Smith said were going to front up and deliver those houses have said that they're not interested in it, have said that they don't have the capability to deliver it. So now they're bringing a bill before the House that's going to increase the scope for private developers to be involved in this, private developers to be involved in this. And of course, what do private developers want out of this? They want to make money. They want to make money out of it. Fair enough. That's their job. That's what private developers do. That's one of the reasons why over the history of New Zealand, governments have been actively involved in the building and delivery of social housing in New Zealand, because they can do it cheaper and they can provide a higher quality of housing than private developers have done in the past. And that is also one of the reasons why many ex-state houses contributed to the provision of affordable housing for first home buyers. And this government aren't interested in that. They're happy to sell them off, but they're not going to replace them. And what previously, when governments have sold off state houses to allow first home buyers into their first home, they've made sure they have been replaced. Not this national government. We saw under the mother of all budgets and under the tenure of the government that took over from that, a massive reduction in the number of state houses in New Zealand. And what was the impact of that? The impact of that was that more and more New Zealanders ended up on waiting lists, Mr. Chair.
Chris Hipkin.
And how did this government deal with that increase in the number of New Zealanders on waiting lists? Well, first of all, they just dropped the bottom two categories off the waiting list altogether. So if you're a priority C or D person on a waiting list, they just cut them off altogether, pretended they no longer existed. Those people still are out there looking for houses, but this government doesn't want to know anything about it. This government isn't interested in making sure that there is sufficient provision of social housing for people who can't afford to buy and sufficient provision of affordable housing for those who want to get into their first homes. They are looking the other way. $1 million it's going to cost someone within a few months. It's going to cost $1 million for someone to buy a home in Auckland on average. That's an absolute disgrace, and that has happened under the tenure of this national government. They are simply out of ideas when it comes to dealing with the real issues around housing in New Zealand. They have got no real plan for more affordable housing for first home buyers, and they are turning their backs on those who can't afford to buy a home and who do need that extra support when it comes to housing. And who pays the cost? It is the children, it is the families that will pay the cost for that. 4,000 of the 6,000 people who applied for social housing in the last quarter did not even make it onto the waiting list. They didn't even get on the waiting list. Two-thirds of the people didn't even make it to the waiting list.
The House is suspended until 9 a.m. tomorrow. Nō reira, ka kite anō.